This is the part 2 of the same question discussing the possibility uh, whether China and Russia could come up with a new world order or not. A number of Russian nationalists are wary of such investments by Beijing, asserting that the second largest economy is vying for influence in the backyard of Moscow. The Central Asian states find themselves in a fix. On the one hand, they border a giant nuclear irredentist state with the largest number of arsenal, and on the other, a rising economic power with the ambition to dominate the region. A large number of workers from Central Asia reside in Russia, sending crucial remittances that are important for the economy of the region. But these states also badly need to modernize their infrastructure, which has been in a shambles since the demise of the Soviet Union. So this is where the two giant powers could witness a clash of interests. So far, both China and Russia have avoided any conflict of interest, with Beijing not only pumping billions of dollars into Central Asia, but more than $400 billion into Russia as well, that has been facing the brunt of economic sanctions slapped by the Western world. China and India are also seeking influence not only in Central Asia and Iran, but in the Indian Ocean as well. Like Turkey, India has also adopted a strange strategy. It wants to hobnob with the West, but at the same time, it desires to be an active member of the SCO that is partly dominated by its traditional rival China. The US is believed to be pampering India in its competition with Beijing. It wants to strengthen New Delhi against what some in Washington describe as the hegemonic power of the communist country in the region. The two countries also have diverging interests in Afghanistan. While China more or less wants a role for Afghan Taliban in the war-torn country, New Delhi is still thought to be close to the incumbent Afghan government, and especially elements in it that were the part of the Northern Alliance. New Delhi and Beijing also seem to be suspicious of each other's development projects. The ruling Hindu right-wing party vehemently opposes CPAC, while elements in Chinese government and their Pakistani friends in Islamabad are very skeptical towards Indian ambitions in Iran, where it is operating the Shahbar port or Chahbar port. The position of Iran is still an observer at SCO, and India is also contradictory. Tehran considers the US an arch enemy, but that has been helping Israel and Arab states to destabilize Iran. Ironically, New Delhi not only wants to have good ties with Tehran and use it to have an access to Central Asia and Afghanistan, but it also enjoys close ties with Washington and Tel Aviv. Such ties with the Zionist state and its backers in Washington irk Tehran, which was deeply disappointed when New Delhi recently buckled under American pressure and reduced its trade with Iran. But beyond these diverging interests, there are converging points as well. Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and some other parts of the continent that are close to the BRI face a yearly infrastructure financing shortfall of around $800 billion. Beijing, with the $960 billion BRI covering over 60 states and more than 1.5 billion population, has demonstrated by already spending over $200 billion on the projects that it has the capacity to either completely meet the shortfall or create a consortium of various Chinese and non-Chinese companies to fill in the gap. Chinese investments and contracts in Sub-Saharan Africa was $299 billion from 2005 to 2018, and Beijing has vowed to pump $60 billion more. According to a November 2018 report of the Financial Post, China has loaned roughly $150 billion to Latin American countries since 2005. But many believe it is not only Chinese investment that could challenge the US-led world order. They argue that if Beijing and Russia have to show to the world that they really matter in world affairs, then they would have to come up with a plan to counter American unilateralism, which destroyed the economy of Yugoslavia, dislodged Saddam, carried out regime change in Ukraine, toppled the government of Colonel Gaddafi, and unleashed throat-slashing jihadis in Syria. Now, Trump and his tedious acolytes are plotting to trigger chaos in Iran and Venezuela, both of which are close to Moscow and Beijing. During the Cold War, one of the purposes of the US that prompted it to jump into the Vietnam quagmire was to dispel the impression created by France that Washington would not come to the aid of its Western allies. Can China and Russia assure their support to their allies by thwarting American unilateralism and preventing Washington from pursuing its reckless policy of regime change in the world? Only such assurance from Beijing and Moscow and practical actions would pave the way for a world order led by China and Russia.